Hi there and welcome to Module 1, Change Your Writing Mindset. Like any activity, our performance is influenced by our mindset. And most writers adopt the wrong mindset because they focus on the wrong thing, themselves. Like clients, most readers are more interested in themselves than us, sadly. So the more we mirror their self-perception, the more we appeal to their self-interest, then the more persuasive our writing will be. And until you get this, you're going to struggle to change your reader's heart, mind, or behaviour. That's why in my book, Rhetorica, Persuasive Writing for the 21st Century, technique number 1 is write for your reader. And I make no apology for repeating that chapter here, because in my view it's one of the pillars of good writing. I use a cosmic analogy for this. There was a time when people believed that the sun revolved around the earth, that man stood at the centre of the universe. Of course we know better now. We live in a solar system precisely because the sun sits at its centre. And we need to treat our readers in the same way. We need to orbit their needs, their agenda, their objectives, not our own. I'm sure you've heard about being client-centric. Well, the literary equivalent of that is being reader-centric. And when we're reader-centric, what happens to our writing? What does our writing become when we place our reader slap bang in the middle of our universe, at the centre of our universe? Our writing becomes relevant. Studies have shown that people will read extremely long pieces of text as long as they're well written and relevant. But the moment our reader picks up a hint, sniff or scent of irrelevance, we're giving them the excuse they're looking for to stop reading. Sad truth to tell, our readers are so busy and they have so many competing demands on their time that they seek any reason to stop reading our words. So don't give them that excuse by serving up irrelevant material. Being reader-centric calls for an emotional shift on our part, and I call this a meta technique because it supports and informs the other 20 techniques in the Rhetorica toolkit. And let me explain what I mean. On the y-axis, which is the vertical axis, we have affinity and empathy. And that's about making your reader feel understood and connected with you. And empathy is a term that's regularly bandied about. But what does it actually mean? Well, it's defined as the capacity to understand and share someone else's feelings and ideas as if they were your own, to feel with the other person. So empathy creates connection. Another related word here is rapport, and that's the ability to connect with others in a way that creates a climate of trust and understanding. And of course the horizontal axis, is our focus as the writer. So you can choose to focus on yourself or you can choose to focus on your reader. You can see that when we focus on ourselves, our language gives us away. We tend to use words like I, we, us, our, and do, as in what we've done or what we're going to do or what we plan to do with you or even worse to you. And we typically talk about the features of our product, service or argument. And I call this weeing all over your reader, which is clearly not something you want to be doing. As you can see, when we're author-centric, the connection with the reader is weak. But shift your focus to them, the reader, and something magical happens. Our language changes. We automatically use the magic words you and your, the powerful word get, and our content centres on the benefits to the reader of our product, service or argument, which is quite frankly what they're most interested in. And your language isn't the only thing that changes. You'll also find that the structure of your communication reflects your new reader focus. For example, you'll start leading with what most matters to the reader rather than what matters to you. And as a result of doing all that, the connection with the reader is strong. This is a very common mistake that writers make. They focus on themselves and their agenda. After all, that's dead easy to write about, isn't it? It's a bit like, I'm sure you've been to a party or a dinner party where there was somebody who just insisted on talking about themselves all evening and showing no interest in others. And there we know them as the party bore, don't we? Most people find that a real turn-off. The irony is that if we do the opposite, is that the more we focus on other people, then the more interesting they find us. So if it's all about getting to know our reader, getting to understand them, what can we do to achieve that? Well, we can do something that I call live research. If they work in the same organisation as us, we can go and speak to them, or we can call them, or we can speak to somebody who knows them, maybe a colleague or a supplier. And if they work in a shop or an office or a factory, maybe we could visit them or visit at least the premises where they work to get a feel for the environment in which they work. We can use social media. We can Google them. We can look at their social media internet profile. We can check out their profile on LinkedIn. That's a very easy one. We can read their blog. And if we're really keen to meet them, we can find out what fairs or exhibitions or conventions or seminars or business conferences they're planning to attend and go and meet them there. Just make sure you don't stalk them. Hanging around underneath their bedroom window at night is not quite the same thing. However, if access to them is limited or impossible, then we must use a much neglected writer's tool. And that's our imagination. So we can have an imaginary conversation with them, asking them some of these really fundamental questions. What sex are you? How old are you? What do you do? What's your role? What are your goals? What do you want more of? What do you want less of? What are your values, hopes and fears? What drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? The more we can answer these questions as if they were answering them, then the more effectively we'll walk a mile in their shoes. This is really about thinking our way into their mind to understand what makes them tick, so that when we have decisions to make as to what to include and what to omit in our writing, we make the right decisions. When I talked a moment ago about focusing on the reader, I said that something magical happens. And we start using two very important words. And they are you and your. These are magic words because they make the reader feel as if we're talking to them and them alone. They satisfy a basic human need to be heard and feel special. Using them liberally, these two very simple words, is an easy device that's almost impossible to overdo. If you have any doubts about the power of personalization, which is really what this is about, then consider this. If you happen to spot your own name, the ultimate personal word, in a piece of writing, imagine you're leafing through a document or a book, or a brochure or a manual, and you happen to spot your own name, would it make you more or less likely to read the rest of the document? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. And by the way, did you notice how many times I used the magic words then? And did it make you feel uncomfortable or strange? It works because it's how we naturally communicate with each other. One thing that you need to be aware of, and I see this a lot, which is when you're writing, when you're addressing multiple readers in the same document, like a magazine article or an all-staff memo, inexperienced writers tend to use you in a plural phrase, technically known as the second person plural. And you'll see this in a lot of emails as well. So they'll use phrases like "at some of you" or "all of you," as if their readers were huddled around one copy of the document. When I see phrases like that, it makes me laugh. I look behind me to see who else is in the room reading over my shoulder. I start to worry that maybe I'm suffering from multiple personality disorder. So using phrases like that really is a sign of an inexperience. I really like what the late, great David Ogilvy, copywriter, founder of advertising agency Ogilvy and Mather, and considered the father of modern advertising, said. He said, "Do not address your readers as if they were gathered together in a stadium. When people read your words, they are alone." So the effect of being reader-centric is that your readers, and they may be your clients or prospects, get to know, like, and trust you. You become both a source and a destination. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, you become a source of valued advice and a destination for your readers. In other words, they seek out your views and they actively look forward to reading your stuff. If you're in the business of sales, consulting, or business-to-business communications, then this is the province of the trusted advisor. And when you reach that heady status, then what happens is your clients take your calls, they reply to your emails, and they agree to meet you for coffee. And that's a great place to be with a client or a prospect, because that's really how you get to know them and build a strong working relationship with them. Which means that selling, however you define that term, becomes just another conversation with them rather than something you do to them. So it facilitates what I call consultative selling rather than foot in the door double glazing salesman selling, which is about pushy selling, where you run the risk of being rejected and of undermining your relationship with the other person. Another symptom of this multiple personality disorder is the word audience. And I think there are 5 problems with this. So when I run my writing workshops, I often hear them say, "I'm writing for my audience." And here are what I think the problems are. The first is that audience comes from the Latin word audiare, to listen or hear. And despite the fact that there is undoubtedly an auditory aspect to writing, obviously our readers are reading our words. The second problem with audience is it's just too broad. It suggests or implies that all our readers are the same. It suggests that we're lumping all our readers into the same bucket. And of course they're not the same. They bring to our words their own particular and individual emotional, cultural, and intellectual differences. And audience suggests we're broadcasting our message in the hope that some of it lands, rather than personalising it to individual readers or reader types. And for me, it illustrates the difference between broadcast and narrowcast. The third problem with audience is there's a passivity about an audience. If you imagine or visualise, see in your mind's eye, an audience in a cinema or theatre or an auditorium, they sit there passively. It tends to be one-way traffic. Whereas I think good writing should make the reader feel as if they're engaged in a conversation. And as you'll gather, particularly if you've read my book, you'll gather that I'm a great fan of conversational writing because it humanises writing. It makes it more personal. So I think that good writing should make the reader feel as if they're in a two-way dialogue rather than the subject of one-way traffic. The fourth problem is that audiences don't take decisions, individual readers do. And finally, the fifth problem is that audience is just too impersonal. When you're reading something, do you feel like an audience? No, of course you don't. You feel like a unique, special, distinct individual. You feel like you, and you want to be addressed in the same way. The point here is that we're writing for an audience of one, our reader. You might be slightly intrigued by the picture that I'm showing here, which if you've read my book you might recognise from chapter 1. These two gents are not about to give each other a Glaswegian kiss, if you know what that is. They're Uyghur horse dealers in a market in provincial China agreeing a deal, and this is how they touch foreheads, so nothing is signed, simply by touching each other's foreheads. That concludes the deal. Now, I know you're probably not selling horses, but I would suggest that you want your readers to feel as connected to you as this. So I hope you got some value from this first module on adopting a reader-centric mindset. Get your mind right, and in my book at least, you're halfway to being a much better writer. To help you make that shift, have a go at the exercises I've laid on for you in this module. There are 2 of them. The first is a role play that you can do with a colleague where you step, obviously not literally, into your reader's shoes and answer questions put to you by your colleague as if you were your reader. And then the second exercise is a bit more mechanical, and it's called Are We Weeing Over Our Reader? Basically, the exercise is about taking a recent document and calculating the ratio between the number of times you talk about yourself or your organisation and the number of times you talk about the reader. And this will tell you if that particular document is author-centric or reader-centric. And of course, just to close on this module, I'm always after your feedback. Very genuinely keen to know what you think. So if you've got any comments, questions or observations on this module or indeed on any aspect of the programme, then please put it in the comments box. Thank you very much.